They're one of the leading rugby content creators here in North America, and now they get their first taste of fantasy Major League Rugby. Matt McCarthy and Zach Lanning of the Rugby Wrap-Up joins the show for an official welcome into the Fantasy Ruckers League. I got a feeling, though, it won't be the warmest of welcomes from our league members. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 47 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. As always, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, Vandy. Guys, it's been a busy offseason so far, a busy week in MLR, but it's also been a pretty busy week in fantasy sports in general. I know this is a fantasy rugby show, but Vandy, Matt, we're in a keeper fantasy football league, and it has been going down to the wire in terms of the playoffs here, hasn't it, Vandy?
You know what, buddy? You just missed her, right? Yeah, just missed
All right, now you guys are just spitting in my face. You know, you're talking about going down to the wire while I'm sitting at the bottom of the table.
Sorry, Matt, are you talking? You're so far in the basement, man. I can't even hear you.
I'm done with this. I'm done with it. You know, I'm going to come out firing this year in the Fantasy Rucker League. You guys just wait. And the disrespect, by the way, Commissioner, about putting out a graphic with a poop emoji beside my name. That's absolutely, I'm sick.
Yeah, don't worry, Matt. We're gonna get to that graphic, but yeah, for those of you who don't listen, obviously, we're crazy enough about fantasy sports. We're in every single type of fantasy sport out there, including fantasy football, and we've been in a long-time keeper league between a bunch of friends of ours for many years. And the playoff race had just ended this past weekend, and Vandy sneaking in there after a pretty wild comeback, sneaking in a few wins. Myself, not having things work out the way they did, but nonetheless, Vandy. You have a shot at the championship there. Matt and I will have to wait until next year. But hey, like you said, Matt, though, yeah,
I'm gonna have a chance. You know, come 30 days, 40 days to the MLR season, and I'm just gonna be firing on all cylinders.
You know what, Matt? I won't even pick it out. I'll let you pick it out when you send it to me.
Oh, whatever.
That's what
talk about it.
That's what you have the time for now, Matt. Matt, you can now shift your attention over from fantasy football to all about fantasy MLR. Get that studying in, get those stickies now written down. You get to look at those sleepers, look at those rankings, and really dive deep so that a last place finish doesn't happen next year, and you can get rid of that poop emoji beside your name.
Hey, it's pretty tough when we've had such an exciting offseason in the MLR, Fantasy Rucker League as well. I mean, we're making signings too,
We are. We certainly are. And you guys may have heard what our newest signing may have been to enter the Fantasy Ruckers League at the top of the show. And we're going to bring them on in just a second here. But let's talk about that graphic, Matt, that you saw on our show here earlier earlier today. We sent this out on our social media channels, and we were kind of teasing the people. We announced last week that James Dealey of MLR Stats will be joining the Fantasy Ruckers League for 2023, getting his first taste of fantasy rugby in the MLR, which leaves one spot that we've kind of been hanging out there to the people, kind of teasing the people who may be taking up that spot. And I think the guys that we'll be bringing on here in just a second are reasons why you, Matt, and you, Vandy, need to be a little bit worried heading into the 2023 year.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely not going to make it easy for me to remove that poop emoji beside my name. So that'll be something.
Absolutely. All right. Well, enough delaying here. It's time to finally bring them on. We teased it at the top of the show. It's time to announce who is going to be taking up that last spot in the 2023 Fantasy Ruckers League. And we couldn't be more excited to bring these guys on. They talk a lot about the USMLR. They talk a lot about rugby. They know a lot about rugby, and I'm sure that's going to translate into fantasy football. Not fantasy football. We're just talking about fantasy rugby. So happy to bring these guys on. Matt McCarthy and Zach Lanning of the Rugby Wrap-Up. So excited to have you guys join the league. You guys will be officially taking over a team for the 2023 year. How excited are you guys to get your first taste of fantasy rugby?
Very, very excited. And it is an honor to be with you, gentlemen, but we are determined to keep that emoji next to Matt.
Yeah, I second that, Matt. Absolutely excited to be here. And yeah, we want nothing to do with that. So yeah, so we're going to do our best to keep ourselves on top.
Yeah, that's that's the reason why I looked out for you guys particularly. Of course, it's gonna help here, joining the bring the rugby wrap up team onto the Fantasy Ruckers crew, help grow this thing, help get fantasy rugby to more people and get people starting to talk about fantasy rugby. But I also brought you guys on because I know your rugby knowledge is gonna keep Matt and keep Vandy there at the basement. Like we need to keep them out.
Oh my goodness.
Come on,
going.
man.
So.
Even the commission's in on this. What is going on?
Hey, I just got to make sure that I'm keeping you guys in check. I'm the one that's got to deal with you through the entire season, and I'm not too sure if I'll be able to handle a year where you guys are just coasting to a championship. So gotta keep that in mind. Okay, well, Zach and Matt, let's talk a little fantasy rugby. I know you, Zach, were part of our Fantasy Ruckers playoff challenge and got a first unofficial taste of it. But what are your guys' initial thoughts about fantasy rugby and the thought of being it being a part of Major League Rugby?
Yeah, I think we all had a team in the playoff challenge, and it was a bit of an eye-opening experience, a humbling experience for me. Diving in there, I did not do as well as I thought, but I mean, it was an insanely cool concept. I loved, like you guys, I'm kind of into fantasy sports outside of rugby. I'm in a few leagues, and man, I can commiserate with you. I'm in the bottom of one of my fantasy football leagues. I'm starting Sam Darnold this week, I think, and I'm not. It's going not really well, but having it with rugby, it kind of combines a lot of my favorite things. And it just was really exciting to kind of start applying some of those strategies that, I use in other fantasy platforms to the rugby space as well. And with some of the players that I love following and teams I love following.
I'm going to piggyback that and just say, this is something that excites me because we can actually make players known more to the fans. We can actually help create star power in the league, which we desperately need to grow the game. And fans across the board in American sports and professional sports love their fantasy sports.
Great point. I mean, like marketing players and getting people known and getting, the USA Rugby stars and the Canadian Rugby stars known across the nation, known across the North American continent. I think it's, it's something that has always helped kind of has always helped sports grow. Like you look at NFL, you look at NBA, what they do great is marketing players, marketing the stars of the league. And I really love the fact that we're kind of that Fantasy Ruckers and the Fantasy Rucker League kind of allows us to do the same, which is, awesome. What the league needs, I think.
And to your point, Matt, about kind of, learning about guys and getting familiar with individual stars, a guy new like Vandy who didn't know about players and didn't know about these certain teams. This was a huge opportunity for that. And now he's talking about guys that he was drafting and talking about guys that he was picking and really counting on a week-to-week basis. And yeah, to your point, it's not just about, at least from an MLR level, just talking about, oh yeah, this team did really well, this team did really well, but it's this player did really well. And these are guys that I'm rooting on for. So it's just a whole nother level of kind of a way to watch the game that we've been stressing kind of all season long when we were actually playing it and heading into 2023.
All right, let's talk a little strategy. I know this is your guys' first go at fantasy MLR, but have you guys put any thought into how you are going to approach the season? Zach, you mentioned playing some fantasy football. Vandy, Matt, and I talked about the league that we are in at the top of the show, and we have made comparisons to the two on the show before, made comparisons between top tier second row guys being like those top tight ends with the whole scarcity thing at those positions, or maybe even, key running backs being compared to primary ball carriers in rugby. Anything like that you're going to try to pull from your past fantasy, I guess, sport experiences to your fantasy rugby strategy?
Yeah, I think for me, when you look at rugby space and the MLR, that might be, a kind of do-it-all athletic fly half that might be somebody you look for like very early on. Like look at what Bodine Waka did, throughout all of last year. Alatimu in that playoff challenge was outrageous for Seattle. So those guys rack up points, especially if they're doing, have kicking duties as well. So, you want to make sure you secure at least one or two of the top guys at that position going forward. But yeah, really for me, that's really it. It's just kind of targeting those positions that get the maximum value for what you have them for.
I'm starting, the more you're talking, Zach, I'm starting to get a little bit, worried for my luck here. I was starting to feel good at the start of the show. We're like 10, 15 minutes in, and now I'm starting to get a little worried about
everyone was just
whether
trying
I'm
to
actually going to get rid
water.
of this poop emoji this year.
It's not happening.
What'd you say last week? Iron sharpens iron? Grow up. Come on.
Iron
now.
sharpens iron, but hey, Hey, look, it's clear to see that maybe one team here is iron, and one of them, maybe isn't so
Ooh.
much iron on this side.
Like what, Diamond?
Oh no, something like trash.
Ooh.
I'm scared.
I'm talking
of,
about myself there, Randy.
I'm scared of James Dealey, to be honest. You guys brought him in last week, I think,
yeah.
right? He is a pretty knowledgeable guy.
Yeah, I'm a little shook by
The
that
ringer.
too.
I'm starting to worry about the insiders that we're bringing into this league. I mean, these are the people that we're getting our information from, and we're competing against the people that are giving us our information to make our
no
decisions on
the info
players.
now, boys.
Oh my goodness!
So we will absolutely be giving you false
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, so what was very funny was that when I first reached out to James Dealey about MLR stats and being like, hey, like, what's your interest in joining the league and things like that, and I had a thought in my head. I'm like, okay, fantasy and numbers, they kind of go hand in hand. So already he was going to have a leg up in this whole fantasy thing. He may not have as much experience in playing actual fantasy sports, but the guy probably sifts through a whole bunch of numbers, and I think he'll be quite fine trying to pick out the players that are going to be good. All right, so now shifting over here, I know Zach, you're a big contributor here, obviously with the college rugby wrap up crew. So you have a big knowledge about some of these guys that are coming through, and recently here, it feels like over the past month, it's been pretty busy with regards to the college rugby scene, both in the United States and in Canada, and a lot of that with a lot of young emerging talent, and obviously with the past draft, also with some key names. We were lucky enough to have some of the guys on the show. Guys like Owen Rudden, guys like Seth Purdy, all these guys on the show. So these guys are going to come in and having an impact. So we thought it was kind of a fitting thing that with you guys coming on and having the college rugby wrap-up guru and the guy that knows the most about college guys coming into the MLR, we have an Ask TFR show question every single week, and we thought this was a fitting one to bring on with you on the show. So, what college player or players from this year's draft or signed this offseason will be the most impactful in fantasy MLR? Lots of guys to choose from. A guy that comes to top of mind for me, Tavit Lopetti last year, Connor Mooneyham the year before that, guys that, came into the league and made kind of an instant impact. Is there a guy like that from this year's offseason that you think can have that same impact heading into 2023?
Connor Mooneyham, probably the best example. First ever draft pick, came out of the gates hot with Austin, was a huge contributor for them. So would have been probably a great pick back in the day. I think he is someone to watch for, who is just now in Seattle. I think if he's healthy this year, he might be a great contributor there again as well. You had somebody like Eric Naposki, that first overall draft pick last year, got to play right away in Dallas. Dallas is kind of just, getting their feet under them. They give a lot of opportunity to a lot of new guys. So, look for him as well. He's also a dynamic player, could be a good contributor there in Dallas again this year. In terms of this year's draft, you don't really have that number one overall kind of dynamic athlete. I think Sam Gala, who went first out of Cal, is a great rugby player, probably going to play right away in Dallas as well, but just isn't, he's not going to do the things that get you points in a fantasy rugby league. You don't really get points for, the dirty work that he does or kind of the leadership aspect that he brings. But he's not that kind of flashy number one overall, athlete in the back three. And then you have Sebastiano Villani, who I think might actually be good, who went second overall to New Orleans. Matt and I actually watched him play in the Can-Am tournaments, this past spring. Looked pretty dynamic out there. But is he going to get a chance in New Orleans? They got two scrum halves in front of him. They like Damian Stevens, I think. And they actually drafted another scrum half last year, Christian Vasquez. So is he going to see the field right away?
Luke Campbell as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, is he going to see the field? Do they move him to a different position? I don't know. So that's a tough one. I'll give you a couple names. I'll stop rambling here, but I could talk about college guys all day. I would say, the best strategy if you're looking for some young guys is to target the teams that do give opportunity to these younger guys. And for me, that's really Dallas and New Orleans. Although Dallas obviously is different because they have a new coaching staff this year, kind of a new situation going on there. So I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the same, but in the past, they're the two teams that have given the most opportunity. So I will say a couple names. One on Dallas, look out for Masvida Nyamarebu, who played center at Arkansas State, went in the third round. I think his year to Dallas, was a great athlete, great all-around rugby player. And then for Nola Gold, they took Christian Olney, a wing out of Ohio State, who is a speedster and showed well in the collegiate shield. I think he's a name to watch as well. He's kind of that dynamic athlete that could score kind of at any time on the wing if he sees the pitch. So that's a couple names there.
I'd throw into the mix too Koi Nelligan, who was just acquired by Old Glory from San Diego. He's from Army. He's a hooker. His work rate is incredible. Be interesting to see how he translates to the professional game. And Old Glory is another one of those teams that likes to get these younger guys in.
The one thing that I get there, or I should say a couple things there that I kind of that stick out to me. One is that I'm worried for you, Vandy and Matt, because they're Zach's bringing up guys that you guys haven't even touched on yet in this when we were breaking down the draft stuff. So that worries me that he's throwing out some sleeper picks that our listeners are definitely going to value in terms of guys that might step up that they haven't heard about yet. But also, I think I couldn't agree more either, Zach, that I think the biggest thing or biggest indicator coming from a fantasy perspective is opportunity. And are these guys going to have the minutes to go out there and really make an impact from a fantasy perspective? And I think that's one of the key things too that you mentioned, Zach, is that at least at this point in the way that the league is formatted, an impact from a fantasy perspective differs quite a bit from what the reality impact is there. You mentioned, doing the dirty work and really the things that you don't see on the stat sheet, things that, Sam Gallo would do, things that we know that Owen Rudden's going to do. Matt knows, having played with him before, that he's a guy that gets into the dirty areas and does the stuff that people usually don't want to do. And guys like that, really may not shine from a fantasy level, but depending obviously on the stats that we've been talking about and the opportunity that they have, if they're on the pitch for 80 minutes on the field, they're going to have those opportunities to score tries, especially depending on the offense that they're on. So, all right, let's kind of shift the conversation now from a fantasy rugby conversation to now talking about this crazy and wild offseason we've been having in the MLR, from international signings that seem to be happening left and right, and this brand new team that we're going to be having in the 2023 year. Let's kind of get your guys' reaction to some of that kind of stuff since we have you here. So let's start off with the big news. The Chicago Hounds now joining the MLR after the removal of both the LA Giltinis and the Austin Gilgronis. Guys, what's your kind of thoughts behind that whole situation about Chicago now being added to the MLR and kind of the process it took to get to this point? Matt?
Chicago comes in and gets to be a powerhouse overnight. Yeah. If they can sign, they still have to work under the salary cap and convince these players. But other than the Vegas Knights in the NHL, what franchise coming into the league in their first year gets to get these kinds of players? Or Vegas Knights, they found like diamonds in the rough and took flyers, some older players, and maybe some guys coming back from injury. But the Chicago Hounds were getting stars, and in that dispersal draft, they had like 9, 10, or 9 or 10 picks in a row.
Right. What's your thoughts on the dispersal draft? Do you think it was well done? Do you think it was rushed? Like, what would you have done differently?
I think that some of the communication from the league owners was not in step with the messaging that came out from the league offices, in that they had no intention of disrupting lives, or of especially those part-time players that had signed part-time contracts. The APC player opposed to the standard player contract, which is the full-time player. And they didn't communicate any of that. And there was a whole bunch of angst around that unnecessarily. But I think under the circumstances, the owners did their best to mitigate the amount of stress and anxiety as much as possible, in that they didn't pick players that they knew couldn't move because they didn't have enough money to move, or they had a day job or whatever. Right. But there was no precedent with this thing either. So, you got, they went beyond the 11th hour. They went into the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th hour to try to keep LA in the league with a different ownership group. So that would have kept those players intact, and then just shifted the Austin players to Chicago. And that would have been a lot easier and saved a lot of angst. But that pushing that deadline and keep going to try to keep that LA franchise in really put Chicago under the gun, because now they've got their players, and they're still signing players. They've got their venue, they've got their practice fields, etc. But it's a lot of work to now do, and while they're putting out a schedule too, right? So I think all in all, it could have been a huge disaster. I think the league learned a little bit about wording certain things and being clear with the players, and players, I think, are okay.
Yeah,
Now,
for
do you
sure.
think
And
it was a little rushed adding a team, or do you think it was a good time to add Chicago?
Well, if you're going to have two teams going out, it's rather than have that hole, and you're also adding a huge rugby hotbed in Chicago's area, and you're adding a Midwest team, so in a big market. So I think it was a coup to get them to come in, and they're going to have Miami next.
yeah, and I mean, you brought up a really good point of the fact that like Chicago got to choose from two of the top teams in the West. I mean,
Yeah.
like what other league or what other precedents could you even think of a new expansion team being able to choose the stars from the top two teams in the Western Conference? It was just insane. And then I know we broke down the entire potential Hounds lineup of even though they weren't actually signing, but who they drafted, and it just looked ridiculous. But I know that Matt, you had a conversation with the Chicago Hounds coach, former Gilgroni's coach. What did you get out of that conversation, and how did you feel about the direction of that club, despite, all the rush into getting all the logistics down? I know that he talked a little bit about how they don't even know what kit they're wearing. Maybe they'll be wearing the Gilgronis and Giltinis, like you said, kit for training. But what did you get out of that conversation? How did you feel about what his outlook on the club was, and where his goals were for the club this upcoming season?
Sam Harris is one heck of a coach, and he was one heck of a player. And he's a big dude. He's like 6'2", 6'3", and he played center, right? He played, if you look on Wikipedia, it says, he played lock, but that was in rugby league. He was just playing in the forwards in rugby league. But this guy, he exudes confidence. He's got a sense of humor. But he can be no nonsense when he needs to be. Players love playing for him. I think it's that was their best signing, Sam Harris. And I just said to Sam, you can just squeeze your ass off, go to Chicago now. And that's the biggest sell, the biggest sell on these players that were playing in Austin and playing in LA. Wake up calls. Like he was saying, well, when I was in Japan, I experienced the winters in Japan. I said, dude, the winters in Japan don't come near Chicago.
Not even close.
Right? But, it's rugby, so everybody will adapt, and they'll love it. And he's a great move, great signing, better than any. But, again, signing these players is going to be difficult. But you do have Sam Harris, and they're, players from LA are also familiar with him because they're in the same conference, and they played against each other twice. And he's an Australian. Kiwi birth, right? But he calls himself Australian, and all those Giltinis that were Aussies, and all the Gilgronis that were Aussies, they all in the secret handshake and everything else. So
that's funny. All right, well, hey, let's move on to kind of just a couple more questions here that I have for you guys before we let you go. And thanks again for hopping here on the Fantasy Ruckers show to give the viewers and listeners the official rugby wrap-up welcome to, I guess, what do you guys think will be utter dominance in the 2023 year? But we'll see about that. But I guess we talked about Chicago Hounds, but just, we mentioned it before, just how busy this offseason felt in terms of, international signings, guys coming overseas to come play. And we did see vice versa. We did see some guys kind of using the MLR as that step up into, more prominent leagues across the world. But we did, at least I felt like, see a lot of guys coming here to North America and signing those MLR contracts with teams after having played in some pretty prominent leagues overseas. Kind of a twofold question for you guys. And Zach, I'll kind of lean on you first here. Is one, kind of, was there any international signings that really stuck out to you? And is this a good thing for the MLR? Is this a good sign of things to come?
I think it's always a good thing when you have good rugby players who, come and play in the league. It always improves the product overall. I think there's plenty of slots, to go around. And even if they're, domestic guys who maybe don't get on the field, they're learning from these international guys that are coming in who've played top level rugby around the world. So yeah, I'm always for, the more talent we can import into the league, the better for me. In terms of, a signing that stood out to me, I think I'll defer to Matt on that. I focus a lot more on the college stuff, but if Matt has any sort of international signing, we want to talk about that. But I'm all for, the more talent coming in, the better.
Well, the international signings are those under the radar signings because they're all quality players. You've got people with foreign knowledge throughout pretty much every organization in the league. And New York is a perfect example of that. I know I'm here in New York, so I'm more familiar with their franchise. But, Rick Stolizzo, the CEO, is from New Zealand. He played in New Zealand. He played all through up to the age grades. He played a bunch of the All Blacks. He lists his personal friends. Steve Lewis knows the United States rugby system better than any person on the planet. And I'll never say that to his face. But the guy knows pretty much 7s, 15s, male and female. He knows everything. He's got a network for finding diamonds in the rough, so to speak. But you get these players, you just look at the lineup for New York, for instance. They're all quality rugby players. And they got a guy named Brad Tucker from Seattle to replace his brother, Will Tucker, who signed a better contract overseas. And speaking of those overseas contracts, Lopetti's going to sign. I guarantee he signs like in the top 4, in the French top 14, or maybe the URC grabs him. So you'll see some, but that's, I think, a good thing for the league. And I also piggyback with what Zach is saying. Think about this: if you have 13 teams, or this year 12 teams, and only 2 American-born players or American-sounding players are in the starting lineup, that's already 24 players to go into a player pool for the Eagles. Before the MLR was around, we didn't have that. So that's already positive. And the MLR owners that are being criticized for not supporting the USA or USA Rugby, they've poured in about $250 million to date right now. If you average 10 teams at $5 to $7 million of losses every year for 5 years, you do the math. That's a lot of money that they've spent in America on rugby. Nobody can touch that at all. And their best interests are that the 2031 World Cup. So they're gonna do their best to make sure that the Eagles are better by then. But we got once again on this landscape with USA Rugby, we've got some chaos and some divisiveness, and it's all got to get settled once and for all. It's like Groundhog Day. But I'm a half full guy. I think that they're going to figure out a way to work with MLR better because the MLR owners want to work with USA Rugby.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Matt. I mean, and you as well, Zach, just about how I think we mentioned it last episode, Matt and Vandy, how you kind of said iron sharpens iron, and if we can bring some top level talent over to the MLR to really, complement the homegrown guys that we have here, it's only going to make them better. And I do feel like, and I mentioned this last show, I do feel like there is some sort of a knee jerk reaction right now because we mentioned last episode on with MLR stats, this is the first time that a North American team hasn't qualified for the Rugby World Cup. So I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh my God, like this is an absolute disaster. Obviously this is not the position that, rugby in North America wants to be at, but I don't think it's as bad as it is. And I think the reaction where it's saying, the MLR isn't doing enough is not necessarily the direction or as far as I would take it, because I think in the long run, we're going to start seeing the fruits of that labor of the MLR start to pay off, when 2030 does roll around. But as a commissioner of this first fantasy MLR league, I will always want better product on the screen. If there's going to be better players, if there's going to be more tries, if there's going to be more exciting plays, that's the stuff that I want to be. If I'm going to spend my Sundays calculating all these stats by hands, I might as well be good rugby that I'm watching, calculating all these stats by hand. So I'll always be on that side. Last thing here, guys, before I let you go, Matt, you quickly mentioned it, how you guys are based out of New York. So we got to ask the pressing question that kind of came out this week. The opinion about the new name for the Rugby New York team, the Iron Workers, I think it's is what they're going with here. Has seen some kind of funny reactions online on social media. Matt has had his opinion on this, but as the kind of native New Yorker, Matt, I'll hand it off to you first to get the first opinion on this new Iron Workers name for Rugby New York.
Let me just say one thing first. I want to make this abundantly clear. I can be bought. So there's that aspect of it. And I do get hired by Rugby New York to do their games or call their games. So I'm going to weasel out of this and pass the buck to Zach.
Well, glad to take it. Matt, wouldn't want to compromise your integrity in any way here.
I have no integrity.
I love it. I love the name. I think the one thing I did see, I think Martin Pengelly pointed out on Twitter, or maybe it was Brian Ray, was why keep rugby in New York?
Yeah, I saw that.
That was Brian Ray. He's Canadian.
Oh, yeah.
He just doesn't get it. So no offense.
Not taken.
I think Ironworkers is great. I'm glad they have an actual name. And now if they can keep it for 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row, then I'm all for it. If this is it, then I'm in. So
my answer to that to Brian Ray was because New York has a zillion professional teams in different professional sports, and you have to tell the fans what sport you're talking about. You have to let them know that it's rugby Ironworkers. They're going to think it's some MLB minor league team out of.
I think it's a
Coney
union,
Island, right? So you still have to specify at this point, Smarty Pants Brian Ray.
I will say at least the good thing also is that they're finally playing in New York, so all the New England guys don't have that ammunition anymore.
Oh, how great is that?
Finally.
The Quincy Flapjacks.
Rugby, New Jersey.
Yeah, no, I think we had on this show one of the biggest, I guess, activists or guys that would stand on the soapbox saying, you know what the heck is Rugby New York doing? Not even playing in New York. Matt Yee has been on the record of saying
I'm not getting my hopes
Where
up.
do the San Francisco 49ers play? Do you know where they play?
Couldn't tell you.
Play about it's
Not
like
in
an
San
hour's
Francisco.
drive south of San Francisco. So,
Kansas City doesn't play in Kansas City.
I mean, it's
how about the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim?
Los Angeles.
that makes a lot of sense, right? That makes a lot of sense, right? I mean,
How about
even
the
you can throw
Foxborough Patriots.
there's that too, or
No.
the Giants and Jets of the Meadowlands. We got that as well, right? So we
It's
can.
12 miles from Midtown Manhattan.
But it's the state lines, Matt. It's the state lines. You can't you can't be. It's the same thing for the New Jersey Giants, the New Jersey.
Where do you
Jets.
put a stadium in New York City? You got
It's-
Yankee Stadium. That's the only one in New York City. I mean, I call it New York City. Queens is, to me, it's an attempt at a suburb that turned into an urban nightmare.
Watch what you say. We got Matt on Long Island there. He might take offense.
Oh, well, Long Island. I don't even do 516.
I think. Well, what's funny is
I'll go to Fire Island, but I just take the train out there and get on the ferry real fast.
Well,
and then dive into the ocean and get the Long Island off of me.
Oh my gosh, shots! So Matt, he's not even going to own you in this league. He's going to own you where you live.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Hey, I have no
start calling him
loyalty.
Dad by the end of the
I
year.
have no loyalty to Long
That was a
Island.
pre-scripted layup, by the way, Vandy. I want you to know they had sent me that ahead of time.
Is that what that was?
Pre-scripted.
I figured.
Well, so I think.
look,
Yeah, go Matt.
Yeah, I got no loyalty to Long Island. As long as you stay away from Canada, we're good. We're good here. You had a little shot on one of your shows, not cheering for UBC to win that collegiate championship. I'll let that one slide this time, but let's stay away from Canada. We can make fun of Long
You know
Island.
what
all we want.
ABC stands for?
Clearly not.
Anybody but Canada.
Oh no! Now we're coming out.
You got
All
ABC,
right, all right.
anybody but England, and you got ABC, anybody but Canada.
We better
Man,
wrap
it's-
this up before,
yeah,
before
it
the
ta-
shots
it
start
takes-
getting too personal.
It takes some balls to come on a show that is hosted by 3 Canucks to say that ABC. I'm bringing that here. That's ridiculous. But
How's Tavares doing?
Hey, I think
And
we
those
need to get
Quebec
Brian Ray
Nordiques
to
are
even
awfully
things
good
out
in
here.
Colorado, okay?
you start making me cry on this show. All right, we can't have that. We're gonna start moving on. Well, to kind of put a wrap.
Best team in the league.
Oh.
They were the Quebec Nordiques.
We're gonna stop that right here. Just to put a bow kind of on that whole Rugby New York conversation.
Eric
think where-
Lindros ruined Canadian rugby forever.
Hey, Eric Lindros was the best thing that happened in Colorado ever.
Exactly, because the Nordique traded, got all those players for him, and then the next
Philadelphia.
year they moved to Colorado and win the cup.
That's right. I happen to be a big Avalanche fan too.
Yeah, to put a bow on I guess the Rugby New York stuff. Yeah, it's a cool name. Ironmore's a cool name. I think Matt, where you kind of get your animosity from, and where I think maybe the wrong foot was kind of started with this whole thing, at least for me, was when they first came out with the announcement about where they were going to be playing. They used the hashtag like views of the Empire State Building. So the optimism was really like, okay, like this is gonna be something that's relatively in New York City. And I guess Hoboken County, you can see it, but it wasn't. I don't think
Hoboken is literally 1 mile from Midtown Manhattan.
I know.
Width of the Hudson River.
I mean, I think we
So
can
that
all
stadium
agree.
was closer to any other midtown of any other pro team in the league.
I think what we can all agree on is the fact that I personally will be very happy to no longer be seeing, kids and parents playing tennis in the background while I'm trying to watch a New York rugby game. So I think we're all happy that they're finally in, a stadium that is rightfully deserving of the talent that they're putting on the field.
It's a great stadium. It's got probably the best turf in the league. It's brand new. It's got the stadium itself has been refurbished, 3,900 seats, which is a perfect size for going here, and they'll have booze and food.
Hey.
That's all you need.
You know what? I'll be there.
Exactly.
And the train's close.
Train's close. That's all you need. That sounds like a perfect evening of rugby for me. That's for sure. So definitely gonna have to check that out. But
Sundays at 3.
Sundays at 3. Love it. Mark it down. And the season.
That's when they play their home games.
I cannot wait for those Sundays to start rolling up. We're really, really close. Obviously, beginning in mid to early February is when it all begins. That's when the fantasy MLR season is going to begin. You managers, I guess you guys have gotten yourself into this now, so you guys will have to start now doing the research up until that time when that draft is coming up. But again, we couldn't be more excited for you, Matt, and Zach, and everyone else part of the Rugby Wrap Up team to join this project and really push this along and get the word out about fantasy rugby and how helpful and beneficial it can be for the MLR as it continues to grow. So we're super excited about that. And we'll take the time also to kind of tell our viewers as well, who maybe not be aware of you. I wouldn't imagine anyone who's listening to us isn't aware of you guys over at Rugby Wrap Up, but give these guys a listen. They have, like I mentioned at the top of the show, kind of leading content creators from a rugby standpoint in North America. You can follow them on social media at Rugby Wrap Up. For the college side of things that Zach Lanning runs, at College RWU, that you can follow as well over there. They got amazing stuff. Matt, Zach, anything you want to kind of tell the people, the listeners, the viewers about Rugby Wrap Up and what you guys are doing over there?
Yep. So we've expanded. So it was initially just Rugby Wrap Up, and now we have the MLR Weekly Show. We'll be starting up the rugby odds again. That's with the WWE legend that is John Bradshaw Layfield. He's got 780 or something thousand Twitter followers, 350 Instagram followers, and we have the College Rugby Wrap Up, and we will be getting a women's show going sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. With the professionalization of the Women's Premier League over here, I think that's a must. Our college show is going to be wrapping up soon. I mean, we have all the college fall playoffs happening. So we'll have a recap of all the final action in NCR and CRAA. My colleague Josh Restio was just doing social media at the Fall Classic for CRAA, so it was a great tournament over there. A lot of great college stuff happening, and we'll be back in the summer, in the spring when the 15s kick off again with some of the West Coast teams. And I will just say we have Colby Marshall did our first kind of pre-rankings, and it was all players from Iona. So we had to send it back to him. He's going to have to redo that. We'll make sure we have to take at least one Iona player for Colby in the draft. So maybe John Powers, we'll see, who knows.
We'll see. All right. Well, there's the little tidbit of strategy that you, Vandy and Matt, that you'll get. Everything else were smoke screens. All you got to know is there's going to be one Iona guy on this Rugby Wrap Up crew. Again, super amazing stuff that you guys are doing over there. Big inspiration for all of us who are trying to create content and grow rugby here in North America. It's been a lot of fun, and been a lot of fun watching your content as well. And I'm sure all of our viewers and listeners will have a good time. If they're already crazy enough getting into this whole fantasy rugby thing, I'm sure there's no shortage of rugby content that they would want to digest. So you can definitely get that at Rugby Wrap Up. Make sure you're also following Matt McCarthy and Zach Lanning as well, at Matt McCarthy, 00, and then at Lanning Zach, both on Twitter as well. You can give them a follow if you want even more rugby content. But thanks guys again.
There's an underscore between Matt and McCarthy, by the way.
Yeah, Matt _McCarthy, and then 2 zeros at the end there for sure.
Because I'm a two-time loser. 2 zeros.
There you go. At least it's the self-awareness is there. That's what counts, I guess. But yeah, again, super pumped up to have the rugby wrap-up team here with us to explore and continue this fantasy rugby journey. Matt, Vandy, they're both super kind of pumped up and also at the same time scared to face you guys
scared.
on a weekly
Don't use that
basis.
term.
But they'll use, I guess, the next couple of weeks here, the next month or so, to really get prepared and see whether or not their knowledge and their experiences that they got to experience in our inaugural season will help them out at all with rugby experts like yourself. But
yeah, and then
then,
if you guys need any help or anything, I'm always open for questions, comments, concerns.
Yeah, all right, Vandy. Let's tone it down over there.
But thanks, Matt. Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate your guys' time. And again, I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you here in the future as we continue this fantasy rugby thing.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really excited to be a part of this. Love what you guys do.
Yeah,
Awesome.
you guys
Thanks,
actually do hard work. So much appreciated.
We'd like to make it look like that. All right. Thanks, guys.
Nice to meet you, boys.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers.
All right, and again, that was Matt McCarthy and
ABC.
Zach Lanning.
Anything but Canada.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
What the audacity, right, to come on this show?
We need to balance this out next week. I think we need to get Brian Ray on. He's straight from the East Coast. We got to balance out here. Have some Canadian support coming on. I guess the Canadian jersey behind me, the Canadian polo didn't do enough. The two Canadian guys. I mean, it's all right. It's all right. We'll live. We're a strong nation. We get by it. And we're kind of invading the MLR in the US because basically New England Free Jacks are Team Canada. And it's just going to keep coming, and that's okay.
I'm loving the rivalry.
You know what?
That's already beginning on the first episode. Yeah.
I want to ask Matt. I'm going to make a wager with him. And if I somehow beat him, I want him to do a 5-minute stand-up special in New York, and I will come watch it. And I'm going to let him clap back about what he wants to do, because he's probably going to beat me. So if it's something stupid, I'm not doing it. But
I thought you were going to say a 5-minute presentation of why Canada is the greatest country, and also including the national anthem of Canada at the end.
Yeah, karaoke night. Yeah, Canada.
I'll get Zach to sing "Oh Canada" while wearing flags and chugging a Canadian beer. And then I want Matt to do a 5-minute stand-up special.
But hey, those guys were electric. I mean,
no
wonder they're the top content creators in terms of North American rugby. Those guys are absolutely electric.
And they know their stuff, man.
Oh yeah, they know their stuff.
Well, as soon as Zach is starting to drop these third round picks that I've obviously seen, but I haven't really dove into them. And he's like, hey, this guy is a guy that can really make
not even
fantasy season.
Dude, not even, bro. When he goes, yo, Lopez, I think Fitzgerald drafted him. I'm like, bro, what?
Yeah, he's not even in the league, and he already knows who's on. Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't even tell you that.
He knows. He had insider information from Fitzy. I didn't even get to bring up. I was going to bring up Doyle Hedgepath because that guy is still my favorite pick of the draft. But I clearly don't know it. Doyle Hedgepath. Oh, you'll know the name, Vandy. Don't you? You'll know the name by the end of the season. You'll know the name.
Yeah. Hey, super excited to have those guys on again. Yep. Being able to bring on MLR stats last week with James Dealey, bringing him on board, and now bringing on the rugby wrap-up team here to the Fantasy Ruckers League is going to be huge. I think not only to just grow this thing, but also to get guys that are really passionate about rugby as well is going to be a lot of fun. And you can see they came in guns blazing on this episode. They were not backing down. So for any of you guys or listeners or other league members that are listening, you got yourselves something to work with here heading into the new season with the addition of some pretty high powered guys.
I think honestly just the better quality guys between them, like rugby wrap up, and then I forget his name, sorry, the guy we had on last week,
James Dealey.
James Dealey. Between those guys, man, that is we just bolstered this up, man. Like, how can I don't know. I kind of accept that challenge. Like that's just awesome to me.
Yeah, I don't think iron sharpen irons works in this case scenario.
To be fair, I went in with the mentality last year that I was going to get smoked. So I mean, same mentality. I mean, same game.
I guess we'll see. Just some final news and notes stuff to wrap up here the show. Things that we quickly mentioned. We did mention.
I think we
that,
touched on these too. in the
Yeah,
interview.
we did touch on the most of them. JP Eloff, he's returning to the Chicago Hounds. We talked about that. A whole bunch of trades and roster moves happening. We'll break those down in a future episode as we catch up. But it was funny. James Dealey came on his Twitter and was like, "Hey, there are 3 pages this week. I think we've hit max of 2 throughout the offseason. This was the first week that we've hit 3 of them. So we'll break down those roster moves as well. I'm sure those are going to have somewhat of a fantasy impact. Talked about the Ironworkers, and then Matt McCarthy did quickly mention it. There is something that I was trying to mention last episode, but we ran out of time. The Miami Sharks. This could be a club that is coming up. Again, I've been a proponent of keeping these teams even, the number of teams, and as soon as we have that, there's already inklings of another team coming in. I do like the name. The Twitter account looks cool, but then again, I have no idea what to expect from this team, but there is something to keep out there. Why are you shaking your head, Matt?
Just what are we doing? Like
Matt,
Miami,
can you be happy?
Miami.
Show me your
like,
smile.
We've got this one city up on the west coast of Canada that just breeds Canadian rugby players all year round, and we can't bring anything up to Vancouver. You know, we can't bring anything up there where it's the rugby
Canadians
hub
with
of
great
Canada.
skills.
Oh, hey, come on now. Come on now. But yeah, you know, I mean, it's great to see new teams. Love to see the even number, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I'm still waiting for that day that they're going to bring rugby finally to Vancouver. And, you know, I guess Miami's the spot, but it's no Chicago. Chicago's a rugby hub. Miami, I don't know how much of a hub that place is.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to see. And again, it's still in the early stages. Still have no idea kind of what that's all about. But there is an official Twitter account out there that we can follow for that. But,
probably paid for the blue check mark.
All right. Well, hey, that was a fun conversation with rugby wrap up. Again, I think we said it multiple times on this episode that it's going to be super, super fun to have them aboard to not only compete against them and test, I guess, your guys' rugby knowledge against, I guess, some of the guys that know the most about the MLR, but to also kind of have guys on there that have a platform like that to, you know, start talking about fantasy rugby. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anything you guys want to add here? Are you guys excited to face Matt, Zach, and all the rest of the rugby wrap up crew? It's going to be interesting, man.
For sure. You know what a win is going to feel like coming off beating one of them? You just beat an army of people. And it's just, you know, just like when you just win that fantasy and you're just,
Is that how you're going to see it? You're going to be imagining that every time you face rugby wrap up, it's Vandy versus like a whole office space of people that are trying to take him down.
Side note, the football game last night when James Conner ran that in, I could have ripped my shirt off. Like straight up, I pulled so freaking hard. I just
That's fine.
I would want to see that.
Yeah, I would want to see that.
You want me to show you?
Yeah, can you show me right now?
Hit up my OnlyFans.
Oh,
there you go. Big tease there. All right, I guess that's a good way to finish it off. Matt, you're excited to face those guys?
Nope. Not at all, because I'm fearing this poop emoji is not going anywhere. So, you know, maybe I'll just wait for the playoff fantasy Rucker challenge, because, you know, that's where I shine, baby. That's where I shine when it matters.
All right. So for those of you that are looking at the screen right now, there it is. Rugby wrap up, officially a part of the 2023 Fantasy Ruckers League. Whole list there. It's going to be interesting. I wish I got their reaction on what they want in terms of getting their name on this jersey, but we'll have to ask them when they're on the show again. But Lads on Tour, Rugby Morning, Someone Else, Feral Hippies, MLR Stats, Rugby Wrap Up, The Rucking Goat, and Ruck and Roll all
look at that
set
lineup
for the 2023 year. Yeah, that looks like a pretty fun lineup.
Also, you know what I was wondering? How am I still at the bottom when there's people who haven't even competed in this league yet?
Well, I didn't make that order. You know, there is a logic.
Oh, just the winners at the top and the losers at the bottom.
They haven't proved it. You proved that you haven't been good, so you're gonna have to work to.
Telling me a guy in the league is worse than a guy who hasn't even made the league yet. This is crazy. This is rigged already.
Debatable.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here. All right, for Vandy, for Matt, I'm Ryan. Thank you for tuning in. We are taking a break next week. We'll be back, I believe, the week after that. So make sure you're staying tuned. Keep an eye out on all the social media channels at the Fantasy Ruckers, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and as well as YouTube. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. You can also join our Discord community as well. Link is down below.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.